Today in First Chronicles, we're going to be studying an interesting tribe in the 12 tribes of Israel. We're going to see a tribe that is unusual in the fact that it is completely surrounded by another tribe. And why it's mentioned the way it is in First Chronicles is a discussion for today. And we're going to talk about that when we come right back. Hi, and welcome to Bible Study with Friends, where our goal is to help you get more impact from your Bible study. I'm here with my friend, Kyle Grinstead, and Kyle and I are going to be continuing in the book of First Chronicles. We're going to be in the fourth chapter. In fact, we'll be finishing the fourth chapter, going from verse 24 down to verse 43. Now, earlier on, remember that the chronicler is writing with an interest so that people could identify what family they belonged to, and when they got back to the land after the Babylonian captivity, they would be able to trace the area that they could live and be part of their ancestral home. And the other part was to trace the lineage of the Messiah who was coming. And the third part was to trace the priests and to identify who were qualified to be priests when they got back and rebuilt the city of Jerusalem and the temple. We covered the lineage of David, again, important to trace Messiah. And then we started with the lineage of the people of Israel, the 12 tribes. And we started with the tribe of Judah, even though that's not the largest tribe and it's not the firstborn. It was important to do Judah because that is the tribe that's going to produce Messiah. So we saw that continuing theme of emphasizing Messiah and emphasizing who belongs to what nation. So we finished up Judah last week, and now we're going to be talking about the genealogy of Simeon. Now, it's interesting because Simeon was born before Judah.
Right.
And in fact, I want you to flip over to chapter 2, verse 1. Go through those names. They should be fairly familiar to you. They're the 12 tribes of Israel.
Okay. These were the sons of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher.
Okay. Simeon is second in line after Reuben.
Uh-huh.
But it's very interesting. If we look at a map, in fact, I'll show you this because it's an interesting discussion. Here are the 12 tribes, according to the book of Joshua. And you have a lot of the names you just read all through here. We just covered Judah. And now we're going to cover Simeon. And if you notice, something very unusual geographically about the tribe of Simeon. What do you notice?
It's landlocked by Judah.
It's completely surrounded by Judah, and it's the only tribe that is. By the time David is king, Simeon is completely absorbed into the tribe of Judah, the geographic land.
Okay.
And so by the time David was king, Simeon really didn't appear. I mean, Simeon had been absorbed into and completely surrounded by Judah and really did not have a distinction of its own. So you go, why then does First Chronicles go into that tribe instead of going from Judah to Reuben?
Yeah.
So we can ask ourselves kind of an interesting question of why mention Simeon. And I think we're going to see in these few verses, we're going to see a reasoning why is that the chronicler, and I think that's Ezra, but whoever is writing the book of Chronicles wants the people coming out of the Babylonian captivity to be able to geographically identify with areas other than Jerusalem. Remember, the people are coming back, and not all of them are going to live in Jerusalem. they were going to come back and repopulate Israel.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that he's identifying here, even though they had been absorbed by David's time, he's identifying who they are and where they live. And that's going to give us some clues to the people of Simeon's tribe as we go here. So let's go into this. Now, I want to refer to another group of verses. Look over at Joshua chapter 19, verse 1 through 9. This is when Joshua first comes into the land and he's distributing the land grants to the 12 tribes. And listen what it says about Simeon in chapter 19 of Joshua from verse 1 to verse 9.
All right.
And feel free to jump over some of the names as they go.
Okay. Then the second lot went to Simeon, to the tribe of the sons of Simeon according to their families, and their inheritance was in the midst of the inheritance of the sons of Judah.
Now, you notice that right there? You notice that from the very beginning, Simeon was completely surrounded by Judah.
Yeah.
It says this tribe was in the midst of Judah, and it's the only tribe that is surrounded by another tribe.
Yeah.
So the family of Judah. And one of the reasons why we're going to see is Simeon is very sparsely populated and really needed protection. So from the very beginning, it was set that Simeon was going to be surrounded by Judah and in the midst. And if you continue to read that, it talks about they're in the midst, and geographically, they're in the southwest side of Judah. Now, where that is, again, to remind you, let's look, because we're going to see some names here as we go. Let's jump in here. We're going to see Simeon is down here in the southwestern side next to Philistia. Amalek is down here where we get the Amalekites. And by the time David, remember David and Ziklag, and David defeats the Amalekites and almost completely wipes them out. And what we find out is that the Amalekites under David ran from this area and they ended up over here in Edom. Just a very few were left because David almost completely wiped them out for attacking Ziklag and taking his possessions. So this kind of identifies where Simeon is. And one modern thing you would recognize is Gaza is right over here.
Okay.
Now this area is called the Wilderness of Zin, but right above the Wilderness of Zin is the Negev. And that's an area today, the Negev.
Okay.
Now you have the Negev desert over here, but you also have the area of Negev, which is where Simeon is, south of Beersheba. Now remember when they came out of Egypt, way back when they were first released with Moses, they came to Beersheba and sent the spies in. Remember that?
Okay.
And then they went into the wilderness experience, all down here, Wilderness of Zin, and all down to Sinai, and then back up. And they're going to come back in, and they come back in up here where Jericho is, right here.
Okay.
So that just gives you some modern references of where Simeon is. And right next north of Judah is Benjamin and Jerusalem, and of the captivities. So the Babylonian captivity had wiped out 10 of these tribes and really left Benjamin and Judah, which happened to include the geographic area of Simeon.
Okay.
But now when the people are coming back after the Babylonian captivity, the writer wants people to identify some geographic areas that they can go back and settle, like Beersheba and some of the cities. So we're going to get into this. Let's look at these verses. Go into chapter 4, starting at verse 24, this idea of the sons of Simeon were, and he names 5 sons. Then after that, he starts to move very quickly because you see, he doesn't really go into all the sons of these people. He just talks about the firstborn son, Shalom, his son, Mibsam, his son, Mishma, his son. The sons of Mishma were, and then it talks about a few, And then Shammai is the last son of Mishma. Now, what is interesting about these two names, the sons of Shalom, were Mibsam and Mishma. What's interesting about those names, Kyle, is that they are Canaanite names. Those two names are not Jewish Hebrew names. So apparently there was some interracial mixing which incorporated these people into the family of descendants of the 12 tribes. Okay. Now, the last son, which was the son of one of these Canaanite mixed sons, was Shammai. And look at the next verse. This is an interesting verse because it's been talking about so and son was, and his son was, and his son was so and so. I want you to read verse 27.
Now Shammai had 16 sons and 6 daughters, but his brothers did not have many sons, nor did all their family multiply like the sons of Judah.
All right, now there's a hint there that this first section about the genealogy of Simeon was about the people, and it makes the point that there weren't a lot of people.
Yeah.
Now, Shammai had 16 sons and 6 daughters, but if you notice, it's interesting, the sons are not mentioned. Do you notice that?
Yeah, that is interesting.
He just had 16 sons and,
no names
6
or
daughters,
anything.
and it doesn't go into who the daughters married. It doesn't go into who the sons were. It doesn't mention them. And then it says, and the brothers of Shammai, they didn't have many sons at all, nor did all their family multiply like the sons of Judah. In other words, there weren't a lot of multi-generational families in this area of Simeon. You see that in the scripture there?
Yeah.
So we're not making that up there. So there were a few people, and some of them were mixed race because of Mibsam and Mishma up in 25. And there weren't many of them because they weren't very prolific in producing children.
Yeah.
Now then it goes into the sections. So the first section of these verses is about the people. And it makes the point that there weren't a lot of people and they were in the midst of Judah. Then the next area is from verse 28 down to verse 33. And now it's talking about the place of Simeon. So up here, the people of Simeon, down here, the place of Simeon. And now it starts to get some geographic boundaries. When the people come out of Babylon, it's going to be helpful to where they live. So these sons up here lived at Beersheba and all these little towns. And it goes down here. These were the cities until the reign of David. Now remember, David just absorbed Simeon.
Okay.
By the time he was king, they were just absorbed. They were all Judean. And so their cities were there. Then their villages, the next step down, were named here. And it's even hard to find a lot of these names on a map today because these little cities and towns were gone by the time the Babylonian captivity was over. But he wanted them to go to the geographic area of these towns and reestablish. Okay. So he's talking geographically here. It says, and all their villages that were around the same cities as far as Baal, that's not the god Baal, that's the name of a city. These were their settlements, and they have their genealogy. So it's basically saying, this is the little contained area this family claimed. And when you get out of the Babylonian captivity, this is that geographic area down by the Negev, down by Beersheba. This is the area you should do.
So are there expected to be people who trace their lineage back to Simeon and then resettle those areas? Is that kind of what Ezra's or the chronicler is getting at?
That's right. And there aren't going to be very many of them.
Yeah, because it's small compared.
Because it's very small.
Yeah.
And the chronicler doesn't try to even name the 16 children. What he wants them to do is say, yeah, I'm a descendant of Shammai. I'm not concerned about which of the 16 sons I'm a descendant of. All I have to do is say, I'm connected to Shammai.
Okay.
And that's good enough to settle this geographic area. Now, from 24 down to 43. The third section is their prosperity. We saw the people, we saw the place, and now we see the prosperity of this little group of people. And it's a bloody prosperity. Now
Okay.
remember, they were established after Joshua had come in and conquered the land. So the big battles were over for the land. They had these areas, and Joshua said, okay, this belongs to Judah, this belongs to Benjamin, this belongs to Manasseh, this belongs to Gad. Here are your areas. So the geographic wars were over. But we find out something very interesting about Simeon and their smallness. Let's look back at this. Go back to the scriptures here. If we start to see here from verse 34 to 43, we see the prosperity through conquest. Now, the conquest of the Holy Land had already been done. But what we see in Simeon is that even though they had an assigned territory, and even though they had a very small population, they got their prosperity by taking over other people, and in some cases, wiping them out. And we'll see that as we go here. Let's look at this. Now, there's a bunch of names here, the sons of, these are discombobulated names. It's interesting that we have a couple of places. We have in Numbers, we have a list of the sons and the names. And then we also have that in the book of Genesis and Exodus. And the Genesis and Exodus lists match perfectly. But the Numbers list matches First Chronicles and is slightly different. So we've talked about this before, where by the time names are handed down, people change. Their names are mistranslated through other languages and are corrupted. So what we have here is a bunch of names that really don't show up in a lot of other genealogies in these verses.
Okay.
But there's something interesting to notice. Let's go down to 38 and 39.
These mentioned by name were leaders in their families, and their fathers' houses increased greatly. They went to the entrance of Gedor, even to the east side of the valley, to seek pasture for their flocks.
Now we saw that Simeon is over on the west side of Judah. But here they go over to the east side of their land to look for pastures, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's read verse 40 carefully. Go ahead and read 40.
They found rich and good pasture, and the land was broad and quiet and peaceful, for those who lived there formerly were Hamites.
Okay, now, they were seeking pasture land up in 39, and they found this rich pasture land that was broad and quiet and peaceful, because those who had lived there formerly were the Hamites. And what this is saying is, historically, they come in and they find good pasture land and they take it away from the Hamites.
Okay.
And it was a nice, wonderful pasture land. It was broad and quiet and peaceful because those who had lived there formerly had settled the land and made it nice were the Hamites. And these, recorded by name, came in the days of Hezekiah, king of Judah. So this is after David, and attacked their tents being the Hamites, and the Meunites who were found there, this is verse 41, and destroyed them utterly to this day, and lived in their place, because there was pasture there for the flocks. Okay? And
Wow.
then right after that, verse 42 says that from them, this area, from the sons of Simeon, 500 men went to Mount Seir. Now, Mount Seir, let me go to the map again and identify this, just so that we've got this clear. Mount Seir is a range of mountains right along here between Simeon, Judah, and Edom. And right down here, this is Egypt here. So Kadesh, it's Egypt. And so what these guys do is they send a small little army of 500 guys. They're pasturing over on the east side of their territory, and they send these 500 guys. They've already wiped out one people group to take their flocks, and they send these guys over to the mountains of Seir, right over in here, and they attack the remnant of the Amalekites. Remember, Amalek is here. David had destroyed them, but a remnant had come across and they were living over in Edom. That just places where we're at now. And this little 500-man army, look where they go. They went to Mount Seir, and there's guys here, Uziel, the sons of Ishi, as their leaders. They destroyed the remnant of the Amalekites who escaped and have lived there to this day. So they lived over on that edge of what was between Simeon and Judah. And they lived over there in that land and prospered in their flocks because they physically took the land away from people.
Wow.
Now, they had been assigned the land from the earlier battles with Joshua, where he takes the land by force. But there were still people that lived there. They didn't completely scour the land of everybody gone. But here we have this little tribe of Simeon who says, if we're going to survive and we're going to have any kind of prosperity at all as shepherds in this area of the Negev, we need to have pasture land, and we're going to get it even if we take it away from somebody.
Okay? Interesting. Okay.
And you have them do this. Now, this is all shared so that when people were coming back out of the captivity, they would have this geographic area. And you can see what they're doing. This geographic area that they're going to resettle will go over from Judah bumped up against Gaza, all the way through the Negev, all the way over to the mountain range of Mount Seir.
Okay.
And so that's where these people that identify, hey, I'm a descendant of Simeon, then that's where you're going to get to go, and you can reestablish yourselves in your flocks in these areas. Okay?
All right. Yeah.
Now, when it says at the very end, that last verse, it says they destroy the Amalekites and they take their pasture land. And it says, and they have lived there to this day. Now, when this is being written, this is at the end of the Babylonian captivity. And what we have a glimpse of here is that when Babylon came down and attacked Israel and took the northern tribes and then took the last two tribes, which included the area of Simeon, that they took people back to Babylon. And we see that in the book of Daniel. But they didn't take everybody. They left some people there.
Yeah.
And when they come back from the captivity, some of the people, they weren't even Jews, and they wanted to help build the temple. And Ezra and Nehemiah basically said, no, you got to prove yourself as a Jew before we're going to let you build our city. Mm-hmm. You can live in the surrounding area. In fact, we've got people that are still living in that surrounding area. And part of those people that were still there that weren't taken captive physically were Simeons.
Cool. Yeah,
so it's an interesting little
sense.
Section. Now, not a lot of application here, other than the fact that God is interested in identifying even this tiny little group of people that aren't a powerhouse by any means, but he wants to make sure that when he comes out of Babylon, that they've got a place that they can go and identify and say, this is where we belong.
Yeah.
Which is just God taking care of his people.
That's cool.
Today we've been talking about the tribe of Simeon. And if you're wondering how you can have this kind of deep Bible study, I want to recommend a video to you. It's a tutorial for how to study the Bible as a beginner. Even if you have studied the Bible for quite a while, you might want to consider watching this video as a refresher. And I hope you enjoy it. If you do, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button. That helps us. We're going to continue in First Chronicles next week. And until then, God bless you.